Okay, this is Longstone Tyres making a short film about fitting a beaded edge tyre. So before we go anywhere, we've got the tyre off the rim. It might be interesting for James to get a little close to the rim here. So you can see this is a well-based beaded edge rim, so it's hooky like that. And then the tyre has got that bead on it there, the rubber bead, the chunk of rubber, which is moulded and built into the carcass of the tyre. So that should be pretty robustly held onto the tyre. And the plan of how it works is that those beads get stuck in those hooky bits there, and then with an enormous amount of pressure, you want at least 4 bar or 60 psi in any beaded edge car tyre. That pushes this bead into that hooky bit, and it also pushes the rest of the sort of heel of this tyre against the rim there to grip on there. So beaded edge tyres are a tricky thing. They never were built for tarmac roads, you know, so they're suffering far more side forces than they ever would have done, and much higher maintained speeds than they ever would have done. So you've got to be pretty meticulous. So I'm now going to show you how to fit it. If you're at home, I'm going to do it on this stand here because I've got one, and it'll be easier for you to see how to do it. So I'm going to use this, but at home, if you've got just any old tyre, and you just put your wheel on the tyre like that, that's your best way of doing it. You can get stuck in there, and you've got plenty to go at it, and it'll protect your rim reasonably well. So what we're going to do is we're going to fit it from the back side of the rim, because you know you can't guarantee not to damage your rim. But if you scratch the back side of the rim a little bit, it's less visible than if you do the front. And so I've got the inner tube inside the tyre, and if you look on the rest of the fit, this should link to another film about beaded edge inner tubes where we strongly recommend putting a Michelin in. But basically, you just fit the inner tube in the tyre before you start working. Do not cut bits of bead out around where the valve stem goes. That's not the right way to do it. It damages the integrity of the carcass of the tyre and the risk of the tyre collapsing because of that. I'm not guaranteeing it will collapse because of that, but you are risking it a little bit more than you would do otherwise. So, there's the tube inside the tyre. We're going to the back side of the rim, and here's the valve hole there. So I'm going to put the valve in first. Okay, and I'm going to attempt to fit one side of this tyre. So I push this on like that, get it on as much as I can. Some tyres are much stiffer than others. I'm using this easy one because I have that opportunity. But you may get something a lot more stiffness. You have to get more than half the tyre on for this first swing when your tyre leaves. Because if you, say for instance, were doing less than half of the time, the tyre leaves tend to go down that way. So you must get more than half on when you first swing the levers. Okay, so I use my big fat stomach to hold it in place a little bit, push it down like that. And then often you would follow that around and take some more bites in there, but this one's just slipped on quite easily. Which doesn't make it a very good example, I suppose. But anyway, and then the next bit was simply take a bite at a time, and you put it on like that and hold that one while you're doing it. Push that in, and you go around and do 4 to 6 inches at a time. And I'm using the hook end of this lever. Okay, so the hook end fits round the rim, and while you're doing it, if you keep the lever at 90 degrees to the rim, it shouldn't mark it. If you start doing it at funny angles like that, you see how it's not sitting on the rim properly. You'll mark the rim and dint it and scratch it, but if you do it at 90 degrees to it, it shouldn't mark it at all really. So carry around here like that. Now, if some of them are a bit stiffer, you might also need to use a mallet to knock them in to the rim sometimes. Bits where that's not quite going in right. Knock it in with a hammer if it's a really stiff one. And then the last bit, you literally Okay, so that's basically fitted now. And then you can see how it's not quite seated in correctly. It's critical you deal with that when you start trying to inflate it. There are all sorts of different techniques. Sometimes whacking it with a hammer like that gets it in, but you need to make sure all that sits in the rim properly. So, if you see here, we're still struggling a bit around the valve stem. Okay, that's not unusual. Now, the washer and nut on the base of the valve stem can trap in between the beads of your tyres and make it a little bit difficult for that bit there to seat nicely the way you want it to. So what you do here is you get a tyre lever and push that back into the wheel. Push that back in. At this point that all will now sit in there nicely, and that's gone in properly. There we go. So that's it fitted. You might want to, before inflating it, I've had one of these bad boys come off. I've had one of these come off, and it doesn't half make a terrifying big bang. So you might want to just check that it's all seated correctly, and you can see the beads in place nicely. So this is going on an early 1925 Fraser Nash. It's not a particularly heavy car, but we're still going to inflate it to 60 psi because that's how the Beaded Edge Tyre technology works. Now, it's not rocket science fitting a Beaded Edge tyre, but we've done it quite a lot. In fact, at Longstone Tyres we claim to be the world record holder for fitting the most amount of Beaded Edge tyres in a weekend. This century. That's the important bit. So, if you want to have your Beaded Edge tyres fitted, pop in and see us, and we'll do it for now, as you say in Yorkshire. And like you can see, we've done it before, so hopefully, you know, we stand as good a chance of not scratching your rings as anyone does. So, there you go. That's that pumped up to 60 psi. Pop a valve cap on it, and that's ready to go back on my dad's car. Lovely. Nice pre-1924 tyre technology. Beaded Edge tyres. If you need any help getting them fitted, contact Longstone Tyres 0044 1302 71123, or look on the website longstone.com and we'll do what we can to help you. You can ring us up, we'll talk you through fitting it, or come and see us and we'll do it for you.